His Holiness has most generously offered agree to our request to answer questions from the audience. Please try and keep your questions brief.
I have a two-part question, which I'm trying to intelligently join together, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do a good job at it. My first part is the accounts of the various stages of death and dying that people have given. Have they given that because they've understood the stages through the meditative practice of undergoing death and dying? How have these accounts come to be? How have people been able to give these accounts of death and dying?
So that's the second part?
No, that's the first part. And
흉내 치림 시에고로 치림 치림 시에고로 흉내
그래요.
치고가 탱글만 무슨 거로 와 이게 이 간다요 그 시샤사 카리나스 이 내저버 저기 아니 공제 아니 영어로 저는 제 송벌에 카이나스
아들 뒤다 되게 뒤도 와 뭐데 저부 탐지 전에 주는 견다 강신은 스매바 다다고 물론단 자에 대다 때문에 미니미죠. 왜냐 심는데 좀 뭐버서 상진을 좀 치게 셔버지로 다가 심는데 간니지 셔도 셔도와 다 되게 상제에 쳐나라 상제에 흉내 다시 무지고 흉내 배셔야 돼. 통문줄 지시 뭐보라 다 시셔라 통문줄 중세고줄 신도고줄 이거죠. 아주 놀대. 다 직직디 유지 내주 인바 이나야 나랑서라 신도 꺼도 되는지 용되기도 와. 다한테 셔바 차라서 다 빼나 겨왕하면 트렌딩에 될라 겨왕하면 그 문줄 차들도 와. 그봐 말배다 문줄 차도 그 트렌딩에 될라 지금 말해. 그봐 따고 미팅에 될라 고주래도 와. 딱 소소 무슨 양수만 용해 되기 무슨 양용 맞정해 되기 다 고주를 되어 봐. 딱 될이야 낭세기 야 리베 좀 리베 뻗어야 고주 직직. 딱 고주 직직이 차도 패시 리베 뻗어야지 매듭지. 딱 드저자디 롱을 된 거야지. 딱 롱디 아니 가서 제숨지 타고 롱세야 돼. 다 잡았으면 다고 롱스 지기 개가 리아 잡았으면 다야 개가 나라 문주 때문에 차라 무슨 사면 내가 나봐 고주 때문에 차라 가서 잡았으면 뭐도 잡아도 내가 나봐 신도 고주 때문에 차라 다 이지 잡아도 내가 나봐 대 해지 신도 고주 때문에 슝 가서 저저티 신도 고주 저저티 때문에 흉나라 너지 무수 겨매 봐 그러니까 저단 너지 무수 다 가서 다 캔에서 오는 다 댄셔버디 너지 무수 겨매다 그 드리지 타네 아니 니네 문줄다 중세 고주 땐배 차라 무슨 건 나봐 봐다 리벤 나봐 나봐 디타네 다 아니 다 신도 고주 땐배들이 다 패지 땐보고 찍임 봐 난수 그게 르파 셰토야 예버디 있더라 나봐 매딩이지 통용원 인도잖아 땅아도 셰 모습을 지면 있네 다디 땐배 차를 패지다 로용 거 말이 아니 니네 디 땐배 슝이야 이 것이 무슨 겨움도가 사지 다들 통해 주야 셔야 제상가 다한다 셔바 차라 야와체 직체 다 셔바 참물이야 아니 양남이 치야디 직체 셔바 차라마 틈윤도 전에 지 내기 감통된기 솔론 티글리 류든 길라 류든 되던 데니 아니 셔바마 틈윤 셔바 차라 틈윤도 전에 친한 거다 차야 드주테디 균이 송셔도 와. 다 균이 송. 다난 대안에 좀 된데 롱을 되는 또 사이서 와. 다 되네. 다디 루루 얍살로 서버 디다 다 뒤치 그런 아주 별 강정이 종기 다 캐바스는 캐루니네 멍구지기 뭐수 냥수 녀니 다 숭샤가 배지 먹고 나서 세고 싶어 봐. 근데 젊지 숭샤베 숭주 나로야 젊지 구스들 숭샤베 숭단데다 구스매도 숭샤베 숭단데 더문도 와. 구스매리야 숭샤베 숭주제 멍구지 냠뇽도 하는 숭샤베도 세고 싶어. 점심은 남달 차샤네 가서 우리 거기 띵인지 제시고 충대받다 슈구도 돈대기 냠뇽 다 가서 우리 냠뇽 전부 이게 되지 그 서비스 하래 그래서 들이 인도산에 다좀 된대기 되나 다도 규나 속 고불루를 쏘고 대주 어서 다 냠네 나네 냠뇽 텐데가 디기 렉시기 데버견이 여대버세 표 강정을 줘라 키루 멍구지 디디 시순 냠는 남베 락지 대두고 로마주 무슨 통하게 되지 디슈로 간다 안 되는 아주 믿어봐도 강성도 삼다나 지 그게 또 저도 통하게 되지 전부 통하도 가 다 독신 또 죽죠
So
네가 내가 자고도
다르잖아.
등dun이 내가 자고도
So this really raises a general question about what are the sources of knowledge and how does one validate certain statements from the Buddhist point of view. So and this may be a commonly shared approach in the pan-Indian classical traditions as well. If you look at the ways in which knowledge are derived in the Indian tradition and they are validated in the classical Indian tradition, we can see there is a recognition of different levels of reality. For example, there is the level of reality which is evident and obvious to the senses. And this is one level of reality where direct perception is the primary sources of knowledge. And then there is another level of reality which is not evident to the senses, but something that can be inferred. So these may be referred to as hidden or more concealed aspects of reality. But even within this concealed, so more direct, more evident to the direct perception.
Senses
direct perception. So more evident to the direct perception. So that's the first level of reality, and they are referred to as the evident facts or evident phenomena. Then there can be a more concealed or hidden phenomena, and within that there will be one dimension or one level that can be inferred. So although we may not be able to directly perceive them, but on the basis of what we have perceived, we can intuit or we can infer. And these tend to lend themselves to a process of inference. So these may be subtle aspects of reality which we can infer on the basis of reasoning or inquiry and so on. But however, there is a third level of reality which are referred to as the which are extremely hidden facts or phenomena. And with respect to that level of reality, then at the ordinary level, the only recourse that we have is testimony of the scriptures. So that's the primary source of knowledge. And in fact here in Kamalashila's text, he does allude to this. For example, when he writes that, he says that, on page 52 in the second paragraph, he says that it is not possible for omniscience to be produced without it's the fourth paragraph, sorry. It reads, if you ask, what are the causes and conditions of the final fruit of omniscience? He writes, I, who am like a blind man, may not be in a position to explain by myself, but I shall employ the Buddha's own words just as he spoke them to his disciples after his enlightenment. And then he goes on to cite from the Buddha's sutra. So this points towards the third level of reality, the extremely hidden facts, where the primary source of knowledge and understanding is a testimony of the scriptures or the Buddha. So now, in this case, the question is then how do we then use scriptures as a form of validation for on this third level of facts? And here, one primary method is to, first of all, to ensure that the scripture itself that is being used as a testimony is free of any internal contradictions and inconsistencies. That's one important fact. And the second consideration is to relate that particular testimony to other statements made by the same author, the same teacher like the Buddha, with respect to facts that can be inferred by ourselves through understanding and by comparing against our own experience and understanding. So through the combination of these two, then one can use, in certain occasions, on specific kind of situations, scriptures as a source of knowledge, a source of authentication and validation. So when we talk about these three levels of facts, the evident, the slightly hidden, and the extremely hidden, we are also talking about phenomena which may be contextual. So certain facts may be very evident to for example, for the person who is able to recall very vividly his or her past life experiences, to that individual, that fact is an evident fact because it is accessible by direct experience. However, for others, it's an extremely concealed, or it's a hidden fact. So it can be contextual. So now to go...
I think, for example, you say, in my pocket, what is here? For you, hidden. For me, Minjuru.
So for me, it's an evident fact. I know what is there. So
and then also, now, for example, our birthday, in any way, we have no ability to know that day, that year, that day, that time, that hour where I born. No way to know that. Only relying on one trusted person who really know that, and no reason to lie. And you see that person memory quite okay. Then we can rely. Now my birthday, that day, because my mother or someone, you see, recorded on that day. So that we totally rely on third person's word.
No. So taking that as the background, now if we relate to your specific question about the death and dying processes and the experiences that are associated with this, first of all, the whole presentation of the levels of subtlety of consciousness which is associated with the dying processes presented in the tantras that are attributed to the Buddha. Similarly, the dissolution processes, which are these are also stated in the tantras. So this is one primary source, and then furthermore, historically there have been great masters like Nagarjuna who have not only commented upon the tantras, but who have also gained realizations of these states. And furthermore, the great Tibetan masters of the past have further elaborated on these phenomena and also gained deep realizations, and often wrote about these in a very detailed way from their own first-person experiential perspective. For example, if you look at the writings of Tsongkhapa, there is a real qualitative difference between the works that were written in an earlier stage and in the latter part of his life. As many of the writings that he composed in the latter part of the life have a much more authoritative, experiential kind of tone, and we can see that these are written by someone who had actually gone through these experiences. And in fact, it is partly suggested in his biography as well. For example, the text that he wrote on Dorje, which is a text on Guhyasamaja Tantra, there the presentations are from a deep personal experience. Dorje sorry, the text that he composed was Lamp Illuminating the Five Stages. There it is clear that, particularly in the section on what is called the Vajra repetition, there the presentations are primarily from an experiential perspective. So it is through the combination of these we can say that these constitute the sources of our knowledge and understanding.
And then meantime, in Buddhism in general, particularly the Sanskrit tradition, they analyze, right?
Analysis.
Analysis is the very, very sort of important. Therefore, Buddha himself, stated, my follower should accept my teaching not out of faith or devotion, but out of investigation, experiment. Therefore, like Nagarjuna, and many others, many Buddha's own teaching, they investigate, and such Buddha's teaching is kasota. Kandata di Trachishima Kanan Digmaris. Trachishima Kanan Ribit, Nudus, Shekwa.
So, for example, these great masters like Nagarjuna, even with respect to Buddha's own words, as a result of their own critical inquiry, would identify certain scriptures as not being literal, because if you accept them at their face value, it will contradict reasoning.
So, therefore, Rumduga, Ribinana, Jumden de Kali, Kabachachi, Yoro. That Dichi, Nizu, that Jumden de Lunkanshila, Kirumin Digi, Ribe Jenny, never made ever. Any Nyamni Nani, Tata Ratchame, did on the Sung Shabadi, that does have a calendar.
So what this suggests is that because of the importance of the role of critical inquiry in Buddhism, and there is a room for even interpreting Buddha's own words and not accepting at their face value. But the implication of that is that those scriptures which, as a result of subjecting to critical inquiry, are found to be entirely supported by inquiry and critical analysis, then furthermore reinforced by experiences of great masters, then these can be taken at their face value and literally.
Chasang di kasure, ya liberty launch, but the result is to tell any number of shady, make a what number of money, any dancing no good to us, and Ganda Migbe China no you go to us. That thing on Nambeshun Shashio. Nambeshun Shisha run the shadow. Just I mean, Mudigo Kai in the Sun, no room with Minam with Ganami with on the Chica. So Shung Nalolia, Mosurata, Muslim Union, and I think Harden, Changus Marva.
So, given this basic approach in the Buddhist kind of tradition, historically, I have also taken personally the liberty to put questions to some of the Buddhist textual descriptions. For example, in the Abhidhamma Kosha's description of Vasubandhu's Abhidhamma Kosha, where there is quite a detailed description of the cosmology, and with the Mount Meru-centered cosmology. And I have taken this
and
liberty.
The size and distance of moons, stars, suns, or disgrace.
So, and because, if you look at the Buddhist philosophical text, when engaged in refuting positions of the non-Buddhists, Buddhists tend to use the whole gamut of reasoning, including forms of via negativa approaches. However, when the Buddhists themselves, for example, now there are two forms of via negativa approach. One is to negate something on the basis of observing something that is contrary to that phenomena. The other one is to negate something by means of so on the basis of non-observance. For example, it's actually a form of a reasoning which uses an argument of non-observance of something, but it's a phenomenon that if it exists, if it is present, should be observable. So by using these two forms of via negativa argument, the Buddhists generally tend to negate many postulations of other schools. But however, these reasonings should be applicable internally as well. So I apply these to the Vasubandhu's description, Abhidhammakosha's description of cosmology and the distance of the planet from the moons and so on, and reject them.
So you see certain subject which is very, very hidden. But then from Nagarjuna up to the Tibetan master, is unanimously accepted and practice and get some experience. And then many writing comes out of their own practice, out of their own experience. Then you see, there's no question to accept that. I fully accept. But that's the say. 말해. 그래서 믿으게 돼. 아주 그 딱바디 쉐기야래. 냠 남배추에 냠니 쳐야지 쿵터지고 그래. 땜배다고 땜배 쑥. 아니 벤지데 리베 짜가천 땅나 퍼스. 아니 두진즈 냠신나니 녀터버지고 그래. that's 쉐기.
There is a general saying in the Tibetan tradition that whatever the content of your spiritual practice for the Buddhists, whatever that is, it should possess three important qualities. The one is that it should be traceable to the Buddha himself. That is something that has been taught by the founder of the Buddhist faith, Buddha himself. The second is that should be something that has been critically analyzed and settled and engaged with by the great masters of the past, Panditas particularly, the Indian masters, and the
Nalanda's master,
particularly the Nalanda masters. And the third qualification is that His Holiness was saying that we Tibetans tend to be a bit biased towards the Nalanda masters. And then the third qualification is that it should be something that has been engaged in and practiced by the great Mahasiddhas, the adepts, and these are teachings that the adepts have had profound experiences of. So that it must be traceable to the Buddha. It has been taught by the Buddha. It has been settled and critically examined by the Panditas, the scholars, and it has been practiced and gained experiences by the adepts.
After going through the text, Your Holiness, some queries arose. One is, what is the meaning of relative truth? And the second is, from the standpoint of ultimate truth, if there is a non-existence of everything, whether it's the phenomena of physical matter or of individual or even of consciousness, that means everything that we experience has non-existence, then what is it that we do experience? And the third is that if it is the mind that is supposed to realize the non-existence, then what does one say about the existence or non-existence of mind itself?
땅배타, 채배타, 니가로 세베 우.
So although the discussion of this will come later on in the later part of the text, however, if you look at the very meaning of the name Madhyama, which means the middle way or the middle point. So the understanding here is that one is striving for a middle way that is free from both extremes of absolutism and extremes of nihilism.
자자가 좀 전에 도제 나라 아니 수는 남미게 발지 셔 잠자로 아니 가서 우리 민대 장삼 아니 규모도 미주도 우선 중도가 민대 장삼 사야지 민점 다점 사야지 그래서 민점 다점 사야지 고아 지침버지 내 모토보도 다 측디기 최대 고아실래 근데 이번 인도산에 이 가서 저기 로비 랭단다 바베베가스야로 다들 신경이 샹다르 시다 가말라실라 어다 디즈체기 아니 아리아 아상가 아상가도 모르죠 또 지난 장도 다 냐는 우모베 나리아 로비 랭단다 로비 시호소다 로비 가말라실라 아니 로비 가서 이신이고 디즈체기 탄예도 랑제 다 랑제 시베이 버리 가르스는 차달도 못 민삼 삼듯이 되니면은 주고 제베이나 되니면은 맨날 매버렸어 근데 인도산에 차달 송구 더니 아니 더 랑제식 송되게요 이 차달을 지 다 샘삼에 델라라도 친 저 탐제 담바를 주베 똥어리스 넘나 엔 라랑게 뭐 주버지 담바지 요구 그랬어 디 담바를 뭐 주나 차달을 주고도 세니 다 디기 차달을 홍구 더하네 샘삼에 최기담에 송유도 자네 에네 땅어 지다선도 되게 신이 숨스다리 와체 가다다 저 가다 가이네 코랑게 뭐 랑삼바 담바를 주버지 요리스 왔다 그러면은 다디 지금 민zam세하게 고아디 아니 가서시래 런진 똑배 신실 다도기 다도 주비 유달라 되는 거네 두 말이지 뭐한 두 말이지 봐 민도 똑과 줘야 돼 아니 다 똑배 따고 되네요 말해 좋아 너 따와 드리지기 타네 담버 다 가서 드리지기 타네 아니 타르 또 연도 치르던 도요 말했어 다 디스티강 손대 가다 대탐자로 최다로 송구 타네 손대도 자 산제장다 나와타고 시월라 니들이 가르쳐 거슬러 이나 아니 아주 강사가 땡려야 기본 다음 강사 세대에 봐봐 상당나 배대 민대 상선지 폐지 즉 약상당나 때마다 좋습니다 봐 자상가 런주버 면제기 강사가 세시 자유샤마도 강사 거를 따요 정도가 코란 루비 자다 이수체 따요세 정도가 그래서 dinner 이번 인도산에 야구 상당나 강사 지산버티 따요지 샤투나 민대 샤상기 모직 샤투 민대 샤상 모디 야구 상당니 디 샤투나 엔 민대 샤상 최 탐자로 민대 샤상디 상당 퇴하시도 다 dinner지 상당과 가려서나 개디 민대 샤상 뭐인가 된지 뭐네 여버지 샤바이나 mikte shiktu yo mare chagdang jese zugzugsi chade 자 dire 인도산에 아도 동리 고미야디 차당 마게 야지 다 순구이바 인도산에 차당 jese 롯데기 mikbe 때디 싸워네 캐보시 뭐 주나 차당 참 하디 다 싸워 내토기 말이 된 고불로 좀 셉사가 돼 아사리 내세 상당 담발라 묘무 도시 지민 중스 네 제사가 네 밑에 하 친절라 용어 도시 그랬어. 그걸 다 잡아.
So, so the question is, how do we clearly define that middle way, the midpoint that is free from the extreme of absolutism on the one hand and extreme of nihilism on the other? And if you look at the sutras, the Mahayana sutras, particularly the Perfection of Wisdom sutras, there are a lot of statements made by the Buddha where he very explicitly rejects any notion of intrinsicness to existence of any phenomena. And he in fact refers to phenomena in terms of being mere words or mere label or mere designations or mere imputations and so on. However, if you contemplate deeply the implications of these statements, such as all phenomena being mere words or mere labels and mere designations and being illusion-like or being dream-like, then there is definitely an implication of veering more towards a nihilistic position, because there is a danger of sliding into a form of rejection of everything, nihilism. And because of this, historically, when the followers of Madhyamaka school, Nagarjuna school, has interpreted the meaning of the teaching on emptiness, they have appreciated this danger of sliding into nihilism. And therefore, for example, people like masters like Bhavaviveka or Shantarakshita and Kamalashila as well, and Jnana Garbha, these commentators interpreters of Nagarjuna was fully aware of the danger of sliding into nihilism. Therefore, they were compelled to accept at some level, be it on a conventional level, some notion of svalakshana, that somehow phenomena does possess some form of self-defining characteristics, because they felt that rejection of any form of objective criteria for existence of phenomena categorically would push towards nihilism. So even the Madhyamaka commentators, like these masters, were compelled to accept some notion of objectivity, some notion of svalakshana, self-defining characteristics to phenomena. And similarly, if you look at other Mahayana thinkers belonging to the Chittamatra school, mind-only school, even there, again, the fear was to avoid sliding into nihilism. So again, these masters like Asanga maintained a notion of some form of objective status to the existence of phenomena. Therefore, when explaining their understanding of selflessness of phenomena, dharma naretma, and they explained it in terms of the relationship between the way in which our language and conceptual thoughts relate to the external world, and their understanding was the Buddha's teaching on emptiness. What it is pointing out is the absence of any objectivity to the external world, and that the fact that we refer to certain objects by means of certain terms and certain concepts, the relationship between these two is a purely arbitrary, a conceptual designation. The pairing of objects with the terms is more of a kind of a subjective choice. However, on the part of the objects themselves, they do not possess any an independent criteria that justifies them to be referent of these terms. So it is in this way Chittamatra, the mind-only school. So here, for example, the Chittamantras maintain the subjective mental states themselves, the consciousness, to be ultimately real. They reject the external reality to the external world, but they maintain the reality, ultimate reality of the subjective mental world. And it is in this way they interpret the teaching of the Buddha. However, there were other masters like Buddha Palita and Chandrakirti and Shantideva as well, who really take the Buddha's teaching, statements like mere name and mere label and mere designations at their literal meaning level, and then they point out that most of the Buddhist schools accept that the notion of person or self or an individual is a form of a label that is given upon a combination of body and mind and aggregates. So although when one searches for the true reference of the personal terms like self and so on, masters like Bhavaviveka maintain that there is something to be findable, but these labels themselves, like person or individual and so on, these are constructs. So what masters like Buddhapalita and Chandrakriti says that if the concepts like person are constructs, then you can push this and extend this same line of argument and reasoning to all phenomena. Just as the concept of person is a construct, even the basis of the label person, they themselves will also turn out to be constructs. In this way, they push the implications of the Buddha's teaching to a point where no intrinsic existence is accepted, no objective criteria of existence is accepted. So within which all phenomena are understood to be only mere label and mere designations and so on. And this relates to the point Nagarjuna makes, because the very purpose, the ultimate purpose of the teaching of emptiness is to help us counter our afflictions, such as attachment, aversion, and so on. And Nagarjuna makes the point in his 60 stanzas on reasoning, where he says that a mind that still possesses a form of locus, an object, why wouldn't in that mind the poisons of the affliction not arise? So the point Nagarjuna is making is that so long as some objective basis is clung onto, there will still be a room for the arising of the afflictions like attachment, clinging, and so on. And therefore, the teaching on emptiness is to help us undercut all of this basis for any form of clinging and attachment. So the meaning of the middle way suggests that in the aftermath of having rejected any notion of intrinsic existence, any notion of objective criteria for the existence of phenomena, one still needs to be able to fully account for the robust activity of all the functions of causes and effect and so on. Because if one is not able to do that, then one hasn't reached the middle way. So this ability to maintain, to retain, to accept the functions of phenomena, cause and effect and so on, in the aftermath or while rejecting any notion of intrinsic existence, that is a very difficult challenge. That is the true middle way.
that they land the joint and to each rang siagi Kazuchu Kada Chuadi 자시로기 랍지 니 저시베 나라 랍지 저시베 나리야 저랑 저리도 차다 뭐만 수 끄고요 디디 자 단지수 끄셔베 고무도 파 렌주잖아요 아니 땡진 저번 중앙도 텐데 동반이 시 텐데 땡에 답아지 디니 우면 라미노 that's all.
So, in fact, Nagarjuna, in his 60 stanzas on reasoning, again states, points out this critical challenge. Sorry, it was in Bodhicitta Vivarana, commentary on the awakening mind, which is Nagarjuna's text, where he says that if, having understood this emptiness, so this text, Bodhicitta Vivarana, awakening, a commentary on the awakening mind by Nagarjuna, is a very precious text, also deeply inspiring, because it presents both the conventional bodhicitta and the practices and the ultimate bodhicitta and its practices in a single text, in a very comprehensive and complete manner. So in this text, Nagarjuna says that, so according to the mode of procedure of an intelligent practitioner, so in this text, Nagarjuna says that if, having understood the emptiness of all phenomena, this emptiness of all phenomena, if one is still able to accord functions such as cause and effect to phenomena, then what more can be amazing and what more can be excellent and admirable? So here, Nagarjuna is pointing out that this is the crux of the challenge, to maintain the functions while rejecting intrinsic existence. Similarly, if you look at the Buddha's teaching on similarly, in the same kind of vein, the Lama Tsongkhapa, great Tsongkhapa, also says in his great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, Lamrim Chemo, where he says, having explained the emptiness, he says at one point that my fellow, those who are learned in the great middle way treatises, even though in a world that is devoid of inherent existence, it is difficult to posit functions such as cause and effect, and identity and differences and so on. However, do continue to uphold this as the true meaning of the middle way. So Tsongkhapa says in the similar way. And similarly, if you look at the Buddha's teaching on emptiness, when presenting emptiness, Buddha does not present the absence of emptiness of inherent existence of all phenomena on the basis that, on the ground that they cannot be found when you critically search for their essence. That's not the way in which the Buddha presents. That's not the key rationale that is used. The main rationale that the Buddha used is because all phenomena are dependently originated. All phenomena are pratitya samupada. So he uses pratitya samupada, the dependent origination, as the key argument, key reason to reject any notion of inherent existence to phenomena. So, so when you think about dependent origination, then you already the very term, expression dependent origination indicates some form of existence. And dependent origination also implies a form of functionality, that things and events do have function, they perform their functions. And and also dependent origination concept indicates that the way in which things come into being and are by means of their dependent relation, by means of their dependence upon other phenomena. And this also points out that the fact that phenomena possess this dependent nature indicates that they are devoid of an independent nature, independent autonomy or autonomous nature. And this, because they are devoid of an autonomous, independent, self-enclosed nature, they are ultimately shunyata, ultimately empty. So it is in this way the teaching on emptiness is presented by the Buddha. And then, and therefore, therefore, Nagarjuna in his Mula Madhyamaka Karika, Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way, in chapter 24, he explains that and that which is dependently originated, that I call.
예, 지랑가도 시대하게 심사면 너버지 찾아올 거예요.
So in this chapter, actually.
정신면은 가양 용미도가 전다 뜻이야.
So in this chapter, in fact, many of the objections, possible objections, are raised against the teaching on emptiness, and the key objection that is raised is that if things and events, if phenomena do not possess inherent existence, then none of the functions can be tenable. So that is the main objection that is raised. And in this chapter, Nagarjuna responds to each of these objections, and then finally makes an important point where he says that that which is dependently originated, that I call emptiness. And this is dependently designated, and this is the true middle way. So he explains the relationship between dependent origination and emptiness in this particular chapter. So, anyway, I forgot something.
저는 네 슈디, 네 슈디 고루루 가다. 강지 땡중 모임, 청가여 모임, 뒤지 동바 모임, 청가여 모임. 다들 전부 돼.
So, and this immediate stanza is followed by another stanza which can be really seen as Nagarjuna's big stamp, where he says that therefore, therefore there is nothing that is not dependently originated, and therefore there is nothing that is not empty. So this is the big stamp in Nagarjuna.
좀 전에랑 같은 너쿵 그는 아주 너 뇌버시는데 송디 강시 깨를 깨버 대마게 우메중 나로를 깨어매가 정도와 깨어매고 내봐도 가봐봤을 정도와 어다 네 깨어매 되는데 깨를 깨버 인자 깨어매를 송도 있는데
So the source
무슨 문제 뭐 말아
the source sutra for Nagarjuna's teaching here is there's one particular line in one of the sutras where the Buddha states that that which has arisen in dependence upon conditions is devoid of arising. So that which has arisen, that which has come about, come into being in dependence upon conditions is devoid of arising. So and the point being made here is that in the Madhyamaka text, there is a lot of references to absence of arising and absence of cessation and so on. So this is the point that Nagarjuna is making, that the coming into being that arises in dependence upon causes and conditions really are devoid of any arising in an ultimate sense.
Arya Deva, the chief student of Nagarjuna, great scholar as well as a practitioner. 르르 르완 지신도 띠무군을 내줄 때 있어. 대신 요모 탐자이장 띠무 점에 점을 줬어. 다오는 요모 점이야 돼. 띠무 점이야 돼. 그래서 좀 거슬렀나? 댄신 레버는 중앙강 통나 띠무 중민 줬어. 대신 매번 꾼지 늘 땀도 통을 내버 차. 뭐 쉽지가. 쉽지버디 그만 싸우시라고 시작공 소리차.
So similarly in Aryadeva's 400 stanzas, Aryadeva being the principal student of Nagarjuna, Aryadeva states that just as the body faculty pervades all the other sensory faculties, in the same manner ignorance pervades all our mental states. And then having made that point, then the question is, he addresses the question, how do we then go about removing this ignorance? And he says that that he who sees the truth of dependent origination, for him the ignorance will cease to arise. Therefore, with all your efforts, you should engage in the discourse on dependent origination.
주변 나리야 가사 진지 땡주 그래 진지 땡주 리버디니 땅에 들어와서 접시 다 타니세요.
So similarly in Chandrakirti's entering the middle way, Madhyamaka Avatara, he says that therefore by means of the reasoning of dependent origination, one should dispel or remove all forms of distorted views, the network of distorted views.
땅에한테 가서 땅안 내 공원 가서 땅에 미도 공마티. 땡시 춘이 민도라. 중심 직전 수행할 때는 땡 중사 벽에 생기부터기 땡시 춘이 민도라 사되기 땡사 식되기 샤나 땜맘 샤나 라나 샤나 땜 되기 때문에 라왕의 동 춘이디 땡이야 땡시 춘이 민도라 중심 직전 수행할 때는 중사되기 예바 초바 되기 탄예도 사실 팬을 예바도 거의 그래서 땡시 춘이 민도라 중심 직전 수행할 때 리스크를 개보신 땡진된 참여가 땡중사되기 탄이 써야 돼. 고아 차상 땡중사 significant
There was a Tibetan master which belongs to the previous generation. He also
My tutor received many teaching from him. You see, that great practitioner as well as scholar, and he actually, you see, the experienced.
So he had a realization of emptiness, and he, commenting upon dependent origination, pratitya samupada, he dissects the individual syllables of the Tibetan term tenjung, which is the Tibetan equivalent of pratitya samupada, or dependent origination. And the first part, ten, connotes dependence, and jung connotes origination. So he says that with the first element of the expression ten, dependent, it sustains the notion of emptiness, because dependence precludes independence and autonomy. Therefore, it points towards emptiness of all phenomena, whereas the origination indicates coming into being. Therefore, it connotes all the functions and the fact that phenomena can have an effect, that causes and conditions, causes and effects can operate. So this second part of the expression, origination, connotes all the aspects of the reality that exists, such as causes and conditions and the functions and so on. And then he says that this mode of understanding really stands as the king among all forms of reasoning, and this is the essence of the Buddha's teaching.
코로나랑 디슈 디수노와 좀겐디마 프랑 손전에 가사래 곰베 빼지 군의 송배 에는 동거 띵중부터 하나 왜 runziyoe 뽑아 중세 얘기했어.
So in his colophon to this text, the author even says that this is composed by someone who has gained a little degree of confidence in engaging in discourse on emptiness.
Do you get some point? This is the key point. 아데 젊은이들이 뒤송해야 한다. 오면 공부해서 나올이야. 당전 전에 니규매베 동상 샤야데 레를 그랬어. 또 동버티니 아니 윤재기 시청에 임버. 다 디셔야데. 오면다가 간에 대투야래. 탄이 써야 간에 대투야래. 근데 이 오면다가 탈투가 까사야 니니도
And so this is really the critical challenge, the crux of the matter here. Tsongkhapa, for example, says in his elucidation of the intention, which is a commentary on Madhyamaka Avatara, entering the middle way, where Tsongkhapa says that it is actually not that difficult to get a sense of something not findable when you critically search for their essence. Arriving at a point where you lose any reference to the term as some kind of objective reference. Arriving at that point isn't that difficult. What is difficult is really to be able to then understand that as the basis upon which all the relationships of causes and effects and so on can fully operate and function. And that is the real challenge. And he says that this is also the most difficult point in understanding of the Madhyamaka teachings, Madhyamaka philosophy.
So your question is wonderful. Very good.
Your Holiness, I'll put a question to you that has been troubling me for some time. The Kamalashila, of course, as you have described here, repeatedly emphasizes the concept of compassion. And in my last sitting, in your last sitting before me, which I had the honor to attend, you'd also postulated that compassion has been the foundation of all religions. And being a Muslim myself, I would agree with that, and it is in fact the fountainhead of Islam, and is there in the very first in the very first surah al-Fatiha of the Quran Sharif. And now, what has been troubling me, sir, is that over the centuries, religion has been repeatedly used for anything but compassion. It has been used repeatedly for destruction. Not only that, we have seen the evolution of civilization, human civilization itself, not on the basis of a compassionate approach necessarily, but the development of science and technology, developing better and more effective weapons of destruction. The 20th century, probably the most supreme in terms of scientific development, was also the most destructive. You had Holocaust, you had the use of the nuclear weapon. Does that lead us to the conclusion, Your Holiness, that religion itself has failed? Does that lead us to the conclusion, Your Holiness, that religion, the very idea of religion itself has failed?
I think two aspects. The religion, many of us, this is simply mentioned I am Buddhist, or I am Christian, I am Muslim. In real essence, not much serious. I think we Buddhists also, you see, they have
So even Buddhists, of course, there might be a devotion on the part of the individual, but when it comes to actual implementation, not very serious.
No. So that's quite, I think whether Muslim or whether Christian or whether Jews or whether Hindus, and many Hindus, of course, you see, they still recite some Sanskrit word, but without knowing the meaning. Isn't it? That's some kind of offering some flower or something, then put something here. Not much change here or here. So we Buddhists also like that. So this, I think, firstly, lack of knowledge. Sometimes, I think, generally we get the impression religion means faith. Faith means just a devotion. So we totally neglected about our our ability of investigation. Investigation brings conviction. Conviction then brings faith with help of intelligence. That faith really then effect in our mind. Just a mere faith. Not much. I think that was the mistake. Whether we accept religion or not, it is up to individual. Once we accept religion, we should be serious and sincere and practice. Then you gain some deeper values, deeper experience. And science and technology, that's another aspect. The technology, no motivation. technology used by human being. So ultimately, our mind, real troublemaker is our mind, not technology. And science as well. Good, science and knowledge. So knowledge, even religious knowledge, if you carried wrong motivation, the religious sort of knowledge, lecture, collecting money or abuse, then religion itself also then become dirty. Like politics. Politics itself not necessarily dirty. But because of politicians' motivation, not that high quality, moral quality. So politics become dirty. So religion also carried by negative motivation. Then religion also become dirty. Those science and technology also become dirty because of our motivation. So these are entirely two different things. Isn't it? That's my view. So I think science, I really, that's what I admire. Modern science is very good. And generally, sometimes I feel the genuine scientist, or genuine, I think genuine scientist, sometimes this looks, I think, more open-minded than our religious person. Religious person sometimes fix our mind narrow. That's my view. That's my view. So religion, faith, is sometimes, you see, they add or equal. I'm Buddhist. I'm Muslim. And then also some sort of religious idea at a certain sort of location, certain circumstances. In the past, of course, people is isolated. So, I think Indian who follow different religion from their childhood take for granted there are different religions, isn't it? Other hand, like Tibetan, we only Buddhist community. So, the other religion, then you see, without contact, then very little knowledge. So accordingly, sometimes attitude is not good. So Muslim, I noticed Muslim in this country and Muslim in Malaysia, in Indonesia, and Muslim in Arab, and within Arab, Muslim in Egypt, Muslim in Jordan, Muslim in Iraq. These differences, isn't it? So more sort of acquaintance, right? Contact with the other tradition. Different. Those, like you see, Muslim community in Bodh Gaya, I think originally they come for destruction of Bodh Gaya. Now today, they are very good friends of Buddhists. More Buddhist pilgrimage come, their business grow. So Buddhists are their customer. So very interdependent. There's more better shops there. Buddhist pilgrim usually can buy everything. Very good, including Buddha's statue. I don't think it's those Muslims craftsmen, not necessarily you see create these Buddha statue out of devotion, but out of money. Good, no problem. So like that, environment really makes differences. So now today, world, interconnection, now growing, and including tourists. And then beside that, I think some religious people, some concerned people, I think should make more effort to promote religious harmony. So I think these will change. And then another thing, I think it seems in the West, the material because of affluent society. The end of 20th century, interest or news, I think new interest to look inward, inner value, I think seems growing. In 19th century, early part of 20th century, the people simply think money, money, money. Once you have money, then everything okay. That kind of sort of impression. Money cannot bring. I think if you think, you see, if you use common sense, and you see, we can see, you see, the many rich family, you see, these, you see, they keep pets, dogs, cats, and parrots there. Why? These people, you see, they need affection from other. Dollar or euro, 100,000 euro, no capacity to show affection to us. A batch of euro or dollar, poor dollar is in no ability to distinction whether you see hand in the thief or hands in the real owner. The money itself, no ability. Thief easily use, you see, these easily use this money. Money cannot say, oh, I not belong to you. No such sort of ability. My watch, I love my watch. If I kiss, no
response. No.
no response. If I hit, no response. Only dogs, cats, if you show affection, then they respond. And we feel happy. Isn't it? That's human nature. So religion is supposed to create that part.